And so in Nakanigay, when we reflect deeply on all things before acting or before speaking, that's how we stay in right relations. There's another word, anchikone. Anchikone talks about how we have to listen to all perspectives, even the ones that we don't agree with, in order to clear our minds to come to some sort of decision for our group. And so through these conceptual frameworks in my culture and through Anishinaabe and the language, we understand how we are set to move in this idea that we share called democracy. And so there are many stories in my territory in Northwestern Ontario in Treaty 3, where I come from, on how we agreed to treaty with our treaty commissioners that came across the land. And in Treaty 3 territory, as the treaty commissioners came, they're really pissed off at us because we took our time. And they came a long way, by the way. I don't know if you just walked the Bruce Trail on a night where the mosquitoes are out. These guys were walking from Ottawa to Kenora, okay? It took a couple days in a few different canoes. And they begged their way across the land, and as they arrived into Northwestern Ontario, what was meant to be Treaty 1, right? Because if you follow the chronology of the numbered treaty system, Treaty 1 was where our territory is. They later signed Treaty 1 in Winnipeg down in Manitoba, because those people came to an agreement before us. But in Treaty 3, we really took our time, and we sent them back multiple times. And if you read the journals of those treaty commissioners that came through our territory, they were constantly annoyed at us because we just ran a hard bargain. And in our territory, our leaders had the foresight of imagining the education clause inside of our treaty, our numbered treaty systems, which is why education is paid for First Nations students that go to school. We negotiated that under treaty. That is our right, and that is the deal that allowed us to be here together. And so when you look at the stories of treaty and how we kind of fought and bargained and traded for what we have today in our territories, it's worth a conversation to think about whether those treaties have been upheld. And what does it mean when an Indigenous person like Saul Mamakwa, who hears from his constituents that no, that treaty is broken. These treaties are not worth the paper they're written on. What does it mean when an Indigenous person who lives in their community, who struggles in their community to feed their families, to receive health care, to receive education, what does it mean when they say, no, this doesn't work, or this is broken, or that the treaties were never upheld? You know, in my research, in my documentary career, in the works that I've made, I found documents. The first time our chiefs in my territory walked to Ottawa was 1909. Wow. 1909, they went to Ottawa to say, something ain't right over here. We're still waiting for the implements for the farming. We're still waiting for the cow that you promised us. Imagine, you know? I think this year the cow's going to come. Yeah, guys.
Yeah.
Just hold tight. Put down the bow and arrows.
The cows are coming.
Did you hear that?
I hear a moo.
I hear a moo, faintly off in the distance. And the cow never comes, right? And so you might say that through different protestations of what it looks like with land back more recently, or idle no more, that, you know, through time, Indigenous people have said over and over again, like, this doesn't work. And so there's something wrong in the relationship there, right? And we've seen this with the rollout of Bill 5 and Bill C5, and both the way the province and the feds have approached this moment. Carney's speech in Geneva, right? That everyone says that this is just a shining moment for Mr. Carney. Well, you know, he never mentioned Indigenous people once. He certainly mentioned the resources over in the Ring of Fire. He certainly mentioned the possibility of what is out there and making promises to the world. But there's a fundamental conversation that needs to be had before we even think about bringing shovels up there. And so, you know, there are a lot of questions that we have to ask and consider in this moment, because I do think there is a moment here. I do think that pivoting away from dependency on the United States, I'm way over my head here, by the way. You can cut the lights, kill the mic anytime. But our dependency on the United States is a scary thing. And I think that as we look at the road together ahead, you know, boy, there is a lot of promise there. And we just have to get the relationship piece right. And so Inakanagewan is the word that I wanted to come and share today to kind of set the table for everyone to think about. And that is really fundamentally about relationships. The relationships you build, the relationships you tend to and care for, and the relationships you intend to build in the future. The forever promise of this place, still exists, but we, I think, have to fundamentally understand, where we are, where we've come from, and where we might be able to go. And so I wanted to offer that maybe to begin the night. And I'm going to share a little piece of a song that was sung in our home territory through the treaty making process. And this song is, when it was given to me in Whitefish Bay by a singer and a song composer, Chuck Kelly from Whitefish Bay Singers, he expressed to me that this is a song that was sang when you knew you were in good company and when you were giving thanks. So it's a song that we sing to give thanks and to bring thanks to those that we are sharing time with. Yahweh ha, hey ha, Yahweh ha, yo, hey Yahweh, Yahweh ha, hey Yahweh, Yahweh, yo, hey yo, hey yo. Chimigwe chendenan, chimigwe chendenan, Hanishenabe, hey Yahweh, Yahweh, hey Yahweh, Yahweh, hey ha, Yahweh, yo, hey Yahweh, Yahweh, hey Yahweh, Yahweh, hey yo. Now, miigwech. The words to that song, thank you. The words in that song express our thanks for bringing good heart and good spirit to the work that you do. And so the words say, thank you very much for helping the people. Chimigwech, thank you. Ende non for helping Anishinaabe, our people. So thank you for being here tonight, sharing your good heart and your good mind. And onward and upward. Miigwech, thanks for the time.
Thank you so much.
Actually, yeah, thank you, Sandy.
We're impressed by you, but your children are not.
Great. Miigwech, Ryan, thank you very much.
Thanks again, yeah.
Give them one more.
Yeah.
One more round, exactly. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And with that important introduction, we want to speak about sort of where we're at this moment in Ontario in terms of the erosion of our democratic rights. And I'll speak just a little bit personally. So I'm new to political office. This is my first term. I was just elected just under a year ago now. And prior to that, I worked as a family doctor. And so I always had really, really strong belief in the power of good governance to change people's lives, the power of the decisions made in our institutions to trickle down and really impact people's healthcare, their housing, their ability to feed their families. And because I saw so many people suffering under poor policymaking, that was sort of the inspiration for me to try to become more involved in our democracy, in our governance structures. And I think one of the things that I've sort of begun to understand as I've been able to participate a little bit more in these types of conversations, the process of lawmaking and how legislation moves through our system, is that it is inherently a very vulnerable process because it is dependent on people. At least still in Ontario, elected people, and that's incredibly important, but still it's a people-driven process, and unless we're able to ensure accountability for those people who are making those decisions, we really are only, one generation away always of our democratic institutions being eroded and taken away from us. And we've already started to see that happen in small ways and in big ways, whether it's legislation to remove our school trustees, who are, our locally elected officials to help with our education system, legislation like Bill 5, which creates entire zones, special economic zones, where labor laws, treaty rights, so many different types of laws and regulations are now suspended at the whim of a minister. We see so many different examples where active effort has been put in place to try to take away some of our rights, and we see people so overwhelmed by how much is going on in the world, in Canada, in Ontario, and in other places in the world, that a lot of this is happening without much notice a lot of the time, without much conversation. And so that's part of why we wanted to gather here today, is make sure that we're bringing this into the forefront of our conversation, that we're being in community with each other, talking about ways and strategies to try to preserve our democratic rights. And we're very fortunate to be joined by MPP Chris Glover, who is the Shadow Minister for Democratic Reform. It is a shadow ministry position that only exists within the Ontario NDP caucus, and is a reflection of how important this role and having someone dedicated to maintaining our democratic rights is within our government. So thank you so much, Chris, for making the journey on a day like this to join us and to help us understand where to go next.
Thank you. Thank you. Is this working? Yeah, okay. So I'm Chris Glover. I'm the Member of Provincial Parliament for Spadina Fort York. It's the riding in the downtown Toronto waterfront. And it's great to be here, and I want to thank my colleagues, MPP Shaw and MPP Lennox, for inviting me to be part of this conversation. And it's great to be here in this space, in this Westdale Theatre. It's a beautiful space, but it's also an historical space. And the other thing that I was noticing is Sandy has 2 of her grandchildren running around. Yes. You may have heard them. And I'll tell you, that's what inspires me. I've got 2 kids and a 4-year-old grandson. And I want, more than anything else, I want to make sure that we leave them with a healthy democracy, this next generation that is coming up. And it was the greatest gift that was given to us, was the right to actually govern ourselves through democratic processes. And we have to make sure that that gets passed on. And thank you. And it's great that, Ryan was talking about, and he used that word, let's see, Inakagawin. I'm not sure if I'm saying it quite right, but this trust that is built into these agreements, and the trust that was given to us is that we would live in a democratic society. And so I'm going to start my remarks by just asking you, how do you know that you live in a democracy? What are the principles? What are the rights? What are the practices that tell you that you live in a democracy? And if you've got a suggestion or a response, please just raise your hand and we'll just take them from the audience. So if anybody, what is one of the principles or rights or practices that tells you that you live in a democracy? Okay, at the back there. Human rights. Human rights. Okay, yep, fundamental human rights. Okay, yes.
Expressing your opinions without fear of repercussion.
Yes, freedom of speech, absolutely. Okay, at the very back. Oh, yes.
We'll give them my
Oh, okay, great. Okay, thank you. Phil Donahue.
Our age. They don't know what I'm talking about. Yeah.
Fair and accessible elections.
Yes, so free elections, human rights, elections. Yeah.
Wealth taxes to ensure that the ultra-wealthy don't take advantage of our democratic institutions or our politicians.
Yes. Yes. Okay. So I would say, can I summarize that sort of as economic rights as well, that they're intertwined? Okay. Anything else?
Yeah, access to information and transparency about what is going on economically, and not just in the public sphere, but also in the private sphere.
Yeah. Okay. And one more over here.
That the politicians work for the people and not for themselves.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. Okay, one more here.
Participation for all to
Yes.
have a voice and have a say in decisions.
Yes. And we've got another one over here, sir.
Oh. Yeah, what about high voter turnout, like something over 90%, as opposed to the, 45% in the last election?
Yeah.
That means
Yeah.
over 55% of our electorate is simply disengaged.
Yes.
And you can't have a democracy as long as that kind of thing is happening.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. We need people to democracy only works when people participate. Okay, we'll take two more. We've got two more here, so go ahead. Okay.
An independent judiciary.
Sorry, could you repeat that?
An independent judiciary.
Yes.
Absolutely critical.
Okay, yes.
The right to protest.
Yes, absolutely. Okay, so I've one more? Okay.
Labor rights. So
rights.
good jobs and
Yeah.
fair negotiations and not to be undermined by government.
Okay. You know what? I think you've got a pretty good list here. I think we've got a really good list. We're talking about elections, economic rights, access to information, human rights, voting in elections, an independent judiciary. Okay, I've got bad news for you. Every one of those is under attack in Ontario today. It's not just the United States, it's not just other countries that are backsliding on democratic rights. It's happening in Ontario. When I got elected, I actually got into politics when the former Conservative government under Mike Harris was making cuts to education, and I got really frustrated. I joined a group called the Campaign for Public Education, and I was fighting for education not just because we need to fight for public education, you know, our kids need to be educated, but because in the 1800s, when people were fighting for for democracy, the same people were fighting for education, public education. Because if you're going to have a democracy, you have to have an educated populace. It's fundamental to it. And so those two go hand in hand. And right now, you know, as Robin was just mentioning, you know, we're losing our democratically elected school board trustees. We've been governing our schools through elections, through democratically elected trustees since 1816 in what was then Upper Canada, is now Ontario. It was the first democratic right that the people of the settler people of this land had. And we're losing that very fundamental right. And I'll just quickly go through some of the other backsliding that's happening in Ontario, and then I'll talk about how we fight back, because this meeting tonight is not just is about how we fight back, how do we protect our democratic rights for the next generation. So let's see, it was Sandy or Robin, somebody mentioned Bill 5. So rule of law is one of the fundamental democratic rights, that the laws have to apply equally to everyone all the time. You can't, you can't select, oh, this law apply to you this time, but not to this person over here. Well, the provincial government has passed Bill 5, and it allows the government to declare any part of Ontario or all of Ontario a special economic zone where ministers can pick and choose which laws, if any, and apply to whom on those lands. Any laws, so labor laws, environmental laws, human rights laws, like all of these fundamental laws can be broken just by a minister without having to go to the legislature. They're giving themselves the power to break laws. And there's a similar law federally too, Bill C-5, which does a very similar thing. It allows the ministers to declare, oh, you know what, you're both applying to build, something, a building on this land. Well, the laws apply to you, but not to you. And the minister has that power. And this is fundamentally undemocratic. And there is a group, one of the ways, and I said I'm going to talk about how we fight back. There's Ontario Place is in my riding. And okay. I know. Okay. I mean, the worst part about it that I thought initially was it's just an incredible waste of money. It's $2.2 billion to a private Austrian spa on public parkland, which is just shameful. But they also passed the Rebuilding Ontario Place Act. And the Rebuilding Ontario Place Act was the predecessor to Bill 5. And it allows the government, the minister, or any minister, to break any law on the Ontario Place project that they want. So they don't have to apply to, follow heritage laws, labor laws, environmental laws. Yeah, none of these apply on that. There's a group called Ontario Place Protectors, and they are fighting this law. They're saying this is an unconstitutional law, and it needs to be struck down. So they're going to the Supreme Court. The hearings are expected in September. So that's one of the ways we can fight back. We can fight back through the court system. Let's see. Somebody mentioned here that you have an independent judiciary. Well, Doug Ford, Premier Ford, has said that he doesn't want to appoint Liberal or NDP judges. He wants Conservative judges. Well, yes, like-minded judges. It's just, that's a violation of our right to an independent judiciary, which is written in the Charter of Rights and Freedoms. The judges should not be an NDP or Liberal or Green or Conservative. They have to be impartial, and they have to be nonpartisan. And so that's a fundamental right that is being violated in Ontario. Let's see, freedom of speech. Somebody mentioned freedom of speech and human rights as fundamental rights and fundamental principles in a democracy. So our freedom of speech has been, and other charter rights, has been overridden with 3 different pieces of legislation by this government, by the Conservative government in Ontario. So it's sections, what they do is they use the notwithstanding clause, and it overrides sections 1 and 7 through 15, or section 2 and section 7 through 15 of the Charter of Rights and Freedoms, which includes freedom of speech, freedom of religion, freedom of association, freedom of the press. All those fundamental rights and freedoms get overridden. All our legal rights, which is sections 7 through 15 of the Charter, which includes your right that if you're arrested, you will be brought before a judge within 24 hours. You have a right to access to a lawyer without delay. You cannot be subjected to cruel and unusual punishment. All those fundamental legal rights. When people talk about the notwithstanding clause, those are the Charter rights that are being overridden. It's an incredible attack on our democratic rights. The notwithstanding clause should never have been put in the Charter because even Brian Mulroney, who was a politician I did not agree with on much, but he said the notwithstanding clause makes the Charter not worth the paper that it's written on. If any provincial or federal government can override it at any time, it's a real, it undermines the whole purpose. Let's see. Partisan judges, freedom of speech. Oh, the other one, and nobody mentioned this specifically, but you talked about elections, and you talked about, the right to vote. And in 2018, the government interfered with our elections. So, yeah, first thing Doug Ford did when he got into power, he canceled 4 regional chair elections, including, right around this area in Niagara, Peel, York, and up north, Muskoka. Okay, so he canceled those regional chair elections in the middle of the election campaign, and he replaced those regional chairs with appointed people. Then they also changed Toronto's elections from 47 to 25 seats in the middle of the campaign. It went all the way to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court ruled in 2021 that in Canada, we do not have the right to democratic municipal elections. The Charter of Rights and Freedoms guarantees us the right to federal and provincial, but it's silent on municipal. So it was a 4-5 decision at the Supreme Court, and they said, no, in Canada, we do not have the right to democratic municipal elections. So, you could elect, Andrea Horvath as your mayor in Hamilton here, and the next day, Doug Ford says, you know what, I don't like Andrea, I'm going to replace her with an appointed mayor. And that legally, there's nothing that would stop that. The other thing they've done is they passed strong mayor's powers. So most municipalities in Ontario now have strong mayor's powers. And what it means is that the mayor and a minority, 1/3 of the city councillors, can overrule a vote by 2/3 of city councillors. In the regions that I mentioned, Niagara, Peel, York, and Muskoka, Doug Ford, the premier, appoints the regional chair, and that regional chair can govern with a vote of 1/3 of the elected councillors on those regional councils. Because of the strong mayor powers. So the strong mayor powers takes away our right to majority vote decision making, which is a fundamental democratic right.
Overwhelming, right?
It is. It's a lot. It's a lot all at once. And the reason that I'm here and that we're here talking about this is because we need to fight back. We need to restore our democratic rights here in Ontario. Otherwise, we are going to be backsliding just like the United States is. And I will say that the government here is following the pattern that was followed in the United States. It's been decades in the United States of undermining the public education system, selecting partisan judges, of undermining, the fundamental rights and freedoms of the people in the United States. We're on that same trajectory here, and we need to fight back. And I mentioned the Ontario Place Protectors. That's one place that we can fight back. But we also need to mobilize. We need to mobilize communities. We need to inform communities about what is happening, about this threat to our democratic rights in this province. And we need to mobilize and get people to come out and to, force the government to stop. For example, they're going to be bringing in legislation, we expect, in March to permanently eliminate the election of school board trustees. We need the community, we need all Ontarians to stand up and say, that's not happening, that's a fundamental democratic right that we've had since 1816, and we're not going to stand for it. And we have seen in the past, when people mobilize, when people push back, we can win. Bill 28 was a bill that the government passed or introduced in 2022, and it overrode, it used the notwithstanding clause to strip education workers of their charter rights and freedoms.
What did they say?
And no, exactly. The union leaders came from across Canada. They met. They told the Premier, if you don't repeal this bill, we're going to have a general strike. And within 3 days, they had introduced a bill to repeal Bill 28 and to restore the charter rights of those education workers. So we've seen that we can fight back, we can successfully fight back, and that's what we need to do on all of these attacks on our democratic rights.
Chris, could I get you to mention a little bit about Paul Calandra taking over school boards and some of that, I think that's an important piece.
Yeah, so Paul Calandra is the Ford's Minister of Education, and so he's taken over now, I think it's 7 is the last count. He just took over the Peel District School Board. He's claiming that it's because of financial mismanagement. There was one board where there were some staff members and a couple of trustees who went on a junket to Italy and spent $200,000 that should not have been spent, But that's the rest of the boards, our school boards, have been grossly underfunded for decades, and this is the issue that got me into politics. I've seen, education funding cuts since 1995. Since the province took control of our local education taxes, they've been underfunding our schools, and it's gotten even worse, since 2018. And now they're saying, basically they're saying, well, one of the excuses they use for taking over school boards is say, oh, they weren't going to balance their budget. Well, this government has handed the school boards a $1,500 per student per year cut to education funding. It's an inflation-adjusted cut. And so that's about 8% of an already tight budget, of underfunded system. And so what he's really saying is that the trustees were not making cuts fast enough to keep up with the lack of funding that the province is carrying, or is providing. And so but he's going around and he's, blaming these trustees. There's this corruption there was this corruption in this one school board for $200,000. But we know we're sitting in the legislature all the time. The Skills Development Fund is $2.5 billion. The Ontario Place is $2.2 billion. Doug Ford gave his dentist $2 million to train his staff. He gave, his his campaign manager is a lobbyist now and got $100 million for his clients.
You're going to have to mention the adult entertainment.
Okay.
Seriously, you can't not.
Oh, yeah, okay. So $10 million went to a friend of Doug Ford's. 10 million of our tax dollars went to a friend of Doug Ford's for staff training, and this guy owns a strip club. Like, it's just, I know, it's so funny.
It's funny if it wasn't so sad.
Yeah, it's just crazy. But anyway, so this is what we're up against, you know. And I would say people talked about economic rights. Well, corruption and the lack of democracy go hand in hand, because when people are not voting, when people lose faith in the democratic system, when people look at the corruption that's, you know, in this government, in the last government, you know, then people they think, oh, well, the democracy's not working, I'm not going to bother to vote anyways. Like, corruption, it gets normalized. And that's what really scares me. That's what scares me most about, you know, David Piccini is the Minister of Labor, and he's the one who's been handing out our tax dollars, you know, like candy to these conservative donors. And he should have stepped down. He should have been forced to step down, but he's still there. And that's really frightening, because that does normalize corruption. I mean, David Piccini's wife is a lobbyist, and one of her clients received money from the Skills Development Fund.
That her husband's in charge of.
That her husband's in charge of. I mean, I want a word for it, nepotism, but
Yeah, I just want to say, and I don't want to interrupt you, but Robin and I both sit very close to Chris in the legislature, and I just want to thank you for what you've brought here today. I know you're probably not finished because you have a lot to say, but Chris stands up and he is so articulate and so calm and presents this information, this factual information, with a sense of positivity and hope. And you never seem to give up. I mean, I just sit there and heckle quite a bit, because it's hard not to be completely disenchanted with it. I heard Robin heckle once, actually, one time. But I just want to thank you, Chris, because what you bring to the legislature and what you consistently, you stick with it, right? You never show that you are disenchanted or cynical about what's before us. And it really, when we sit in the legislature, what is across the aisle from us is really hard to stomach sometimes. So I just want to thank you as your colleague. You may not know that I'm paying attention to you, because we're in there for many, many long hours, but I am. So thank you for that, you know?
Yeah. Well, thank you.
Yeah.
You know what? Actually, heckling in the House is a big part of the game too, so thank you for what you're doing. And,
I bring Hamilton to the House.
I mean, yeah, and Robin, thank goodness we've got you in the House, because the other thing that's under attack right now is our public health care system. And Robin, being a doctor and having direct, experience with this, when the government's spewing stuff about the healthcare system, Robin can say, no, that's not what's happening on the ground, and bring that experience there. So you're very fortunate to be represented by these two incredible people here, these two MPPs. Yeah.
It's a love-in now.
Okay.
I think we should jump in, because really, and I should have said this at the beginning, but first of all, thank you to all of you for coming out, because it really is, you know, inspiration to us to see so many of our constituents really digging into these issues and wanting to do your part and wanting to take action. So thank you very much for being here tonight.
Thank you so much. Give yourselves a round of applause. Let's do it. Thank you.
But we'd love to open it up for any questions that you have. We'd love to hear from you.
I can see Sally Palmer from a mile away. Dr. Sally Palmer.
Thank you. Oh, thanks.
King Charles recipient.
One of the things.
King Charles Medal recipient, I would like to say. Congratulations, Sally.
Thank you. One of the things that really annoys me is that I don't think Doug Ford really likes being in the legislature. He gets into all kinds of things of his own if the legislature isn't sitting. But he's done terrible things to the hours or the length of the gaps. Like right now, I think it was the 11th of December it sat down, and first it was supposed to come back in early March. Now he's managed to get it changed to the 23rd. And it was last year, there were 19 weeks of the year that the legislature didn't sit. So we've elected you people, and you don't get to sit there as much.
I gotta I'll mention, but I think or maybe I'll answer, that's okay? But I think so you're absolutely right. It's unbelievable, how little time we spend there. And even when we're in session, how little time the Premier is even there as well. You're right, he doesn't like to be there, he doesn't need to be there, and these long breaks have a purpose, and the purpose, in my mind, and you guys can weigh in on what you think, is twofold. One is, he really doesn't have to be held to account. Like, David Piccini was under the microscope. It was getting hot in there for him, with us asking questions and the press asking questions. Now that, now that the House has risen, the heat is off, right? So and that same for Ford. So they don't like to be held to account. They don't like to answer questions. The second thing is that in every bill they pass, and they pass bills like in a New York minute, right? So they'll introduce bills. They've changed the standing orders, which is basically the way the rules of the House operate. We'll all probably remember when from high school civics. Introduce at first read. We have second read debate, which used to take 2-3 days, sometimes up to a week. Then they'd send bills to committee, and they would invite people and experts to committee to weigh in on the bill, to say, you know what, this is, this bill could be improved if you included this, or we hear from people that say this bill is going to impact me in a really negative way. And the idea is that a good government would then take that information at committee and amend the bill. We introduce amendments endlessly. I'm not kidding. I don't think they've accepted one of our amendments since I've been there in 2018 ever. I don't think one single amendment that we've put forward or any of the other parties have put forward. Then they bring the bill back for third read and then they pass it. They now, though, skip committee altogether. So they go from second read to third read, and it gets passed in a week sometimes. And what do they call it when they time allocate, right? So they reduce the time that we can debate it. So they pass them really quickly. And I know this is like kind of boring a little bit, but it's the mechanics of how our democracy is being eroded, the mechanics of how bills get passed. And in addition to each one of these bills, there are schedules that say that basically, the details will be, determined at regulation. So it's kind of signing a blank check. So that means that the cabinet or the government can iron out the details and add more things to a bill that happened in regulation, and it never has to come back to the House, and it certainly never goes out for consultation. So they give themselves power within each of these bills that they rush through the House to do their business, behind closed doors in the Premier's office. And so, Sally, long-winded way to answer your question. That's why they don't need to be there. They're working at making our Westminster parliamentary democracy system irrelevant by the way they're eroding the rules. So, yeah.
And just one important piece to that was, I think there were a couple dozen bills passed in the last year. Only 2 of them went through the committee process. And, I sit on the social policy committee, which is, healthcare, education, long-term care, things like that. Not a single bill went to that committee in the entire year. So that just shows you how little they are using all the other representatives.
I would just add to that, they're basically bypassing the legislature.
Right.
And so every bill they introduce is an omnibus bill. And it'll have, some of them are well over 200 pages, and they will touch on 15 different unrelated acts. It'll be a whole smorgasbord of things. And we will pick on something, you'll pick on one thing in a bill, and you'll say, we're going to just focus on this, because you can't focus on 15 things at once in public debate. And maybe if we raise enough awareness, they'll backtrack on that one schedule, but then the other 14 things get through. It's called flooding the zone.
That's right.
And so they flood the zone, and then you can't fight against it. And then the other thing is, as Sandy was talking about, so with the way the legislation works, there's the legislation gets introduced, and then there's 3 readings, and then votes and royal assent. And then the ministers are empowered to make regulations, and the regulations are actually the rules. And what they keep doing is every bill expands the powers of the ministers to make decisions through regulations. So they don't need the House to sit anymore, because the ministers have been empowered. Bill 5 is a perfect example. The ministers ministers can now overrule any law, anytime, anywhere that they want, or decide who it applies to and who it doesn't apply to. And that's fundamentally undemocratic. Like, governments are elected to change laws, and they, you know, there's a process for doing it. If they want to override an environmental law for a project like the Ontario Place, they can do it. They could just have to introduce legislation to override that bill, or to change the act, and then it goes through three readings and votes, and then it goes to royal assent. But they're bypassing that whole process. So they're saying the minister can just do it by fiat. And that's really, really dangerous and undemocratic.
Yeah, and it's shocking, and at the risk of us sound like we're complaining because we sit there. I mean, it's really, they not only are making the legislature irrelevant, the role of official opposition in it being checks and balance, and the official opposition playing an actual role in our democratic system has been completely, or he is trying as much as possible to nullify that power of the official opposition. And that's the power of who you elected. So it's not just us that he's muzzling. He's muzzling the opinions and the concerns and the will of the people that, you know, the people of the province of Ontario. And so it's really hard for us to convey this in a way, because it does sound like it's kind of like insider baseball a little bit. But there's a concept of democracy, and then there's the mechanics, the rules, the things that they do to chip away at it. And this is full-on whining, this next thing I'm going to say. They introduce a bill on like a Tuesday afternoon. Wednesday morning, we start debating it. So it could be a 200-page bill that Tuesday morning, everybody's going, oh my God, I have House duty tomorrow morning. What's in this bill? What do we have to say? We have to start debating it. The clock starts ticking. And so not only is that a disservice to official opposition, because we don't have the time to really thoughtfully understand and consider what's in the bill, we don't have an opportunity to reach out to experts and people that are impacted. If it's a bill that's healthcare, if it's a bill that's education or labor, it really limits our ability to engage people to say, what do you think about this? How does it impact you? Or to get people to come to the legislature so that they certainly don't listen to us in official opposition, and they don't need to listen to people in the province of Ontario if we can't get people there and our voices aren't loud enough, right?
We should take more questions.
Oh, yeah, sorry, more questions?
Yes.
Dr. Yates.
Oh.
So my question is, what do we do about it?
Yes.
I mean, we need some strategies. I like your strategy of joining, for example, a legal challenge to say Ontario Place.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. But somehow we need more than that. We need strategies that can engage people in a number of different ways, whether it be, and having been from Hamilton for 35 years, the NDP has lost a lot of ground in ridings it shouldn't have. So how do we rebuild from the ground up? Because to be honest with you, the only way of winning is to start rebuilding from the ground up, and that includes whether it be elections, but also in other ways. How do we make sure we can be there when you have that important bill and you know that there's a group you can call that will come out and make sure that there is some kind of protest? So what are these strategies that you're thinking about in response that we can get involved with?
I think all of us will probably have one little piece to share. I'll share one little piece that I've been talking to a lot of people about. And it has to do with the comment we got about the lack of participation in elections. And I think the other thing that I've really noticed, and perhaps because I'm a little bit less politically tapped in than these two who've been doing this job for excellently for so long, is that, you know, I have been testing out sort of among sort of my social networks in my community, sort of what is it, how do we get knowledge out? Like, how do we get communication out about these sorts of things that are happening? And what I've found really, and especially in my riding of Hamilton Centre, is people are under so much strain right now. There are so many people just struggling to make ends meet, figuring out how to pay the rent, how to get groceries, how to take care of their families, how to access healthcare, get a doctor, that, you know, even taking the time to be able to read the traditional news and sort of participate in politics when it feels so cynical and discouraging, it's just sort of fallen off a lot of people's sort of awareness. And then we see, a lack of outrage when some things happen because it's just not reaching people's radar and they're not getting information from the same places. So what we've noticed, and when we've asked and when we've polled people, most people aren't getting their news from the newspaper anymore. They're not getting it from traditional reporters on television. They're getting it from informal channels like podcasts, social media, or their social networks. And we can't control all of that, but what we can control are our own social networks. And so I have been saying to a lot of people who are very politically engaged when they want a way to be involved is we need to bring politics back to everyday dinner conversation, where you're actually speaking about what's going on, you're pointing the finger to where it needs to be pointed in terms of who's doing all of these things, who's responsible for, the underfunding in our education system, who's responsible for the 18-hour wait that you had in the emergency department, and really connecting those dots, and then figuring out ways of encouraging the people around you to be engaged, really being active in saying, I'm going to rally, I'm going to protest, I want to bring you. And then building those connections so that by the time the next election comes around, people have skin in the game, they're worried about one particular issue, and we can all be worried about different issues, but that we're all connected in thinking about this and showing up to the ballot box is one way. But
yes. Yeah, and I would just like to add to that I think everybody in this room, everybody who is here, is obviously committed to restoring our democratic rights in this province. Am I right? Yes? Okay. Yes, yeah, give yourselves a round of applause. That's what we're here for. We're here to mobilize. And what you said, and what Robin was saying, think about how many ways do you have to communicate with other people? Because we need to mobilize. We need to have lists and lists of people. You each should have a list of people that you can contact. So I brought in a bill in December to create a commissioner of democratic rights, which would be an arm's length person, overseer in the legislature. Just like the Auditor General oversees economic what's happening economically, this commissioner would oversee our democratic rights. And if the government's doing something, they would be writing a report and publishing the report. It would get out in the media, and hopefully that would be enough pressure to actually get the government to backtrack. When we're introducing bills like that, we need people to show up in the legislature. We need people to come, sit in the galleries, participate, maybe have a rally outside to show the government that this is not just, a few MPPs, that the people of this province are behind these motions or these bills. And so think about how you can communicate with others. And it could be as simple as, writing to your MPP or encouraging your friends to write to their MPPs, in whatever riding that they live in, and also writing letters to the editor at the newspaper, just getting your voice out there, making sure that more and more people are becoming aware, because democracy started as a grassroots movement 200 years ago, and it's only going to survive this crisis as a grassroots movement, and we all need to be doing our part at the grassroots level. Yeah.
And I will add very quickly, it's not business as usual. So the alignments that the NDP traditionally had, alignment with labor, alignment with socially progressive-minded people, it's not as easy as it used to be. And I would say, in full cynical outlook, that other political parties have looked at the traditional alliances that we had with unions and labor and thought, how can we break that up? Because, united we stand, divided we fall. So we are doing this one bit at a time, one community at a time, one phone call at a time, lists of people, engaging people, but it's also happening at a really macro level where it's an intentional strategy to make sure that everyone is pitted against each other, interests are pitted against each other. Perfect example in education. Teachers pitted against parents, elected trustees pitted against taxpayers. So the game now is, I'm sure if you go back to 1930, it was an ugly game, but the game is really ugly in trying to bring together coalitions of people that can move together, right? Yeah.
And then Michaela.
Hi, good evening, thank you. My name is Dan, and I just, for the whole panel, just listening thus far, you know, the procedural games that are played, you know, threatening with democracy, and then we have an apathy towards politics, even a cynicism towards politics. So to do like a real, when there's a problem in my line of work, to do a root cause analysis, right, to really boil it down, it can be very complicated. But the one thing that is a turnoff, and I'm 52 and I've seen this, is people's votes don't count at the very beginning, right? There's a whole slew of perspectives that get tossed out by our current system, right? Whereas mobilization, quote unquote, or engagement or enthusiasm could bring a lot of people around if they knew that when they showed up that their one vote counted to something. It counted to something. So in that case, as a step forward, I just wanted to put out to the NDP party, what is the path forward for the party for proportional representation?
Okay, so I'm actually the critic for democratic reform, and we are the only party that has that position. So we are committed to, you know, forcing governments to have a citizens assembly so that they could go out and determine the path forward towards democratic reform. Because right now, you know, Doug Ford's had 3 majority governments with 40% of the vote. You know, so 60% of the people did not want that government. And what ends up happening is people do strategic voting. And strategic voting means that you don't actually get to vote for who you want to vote for. The way the proportional representation works is that if you get 40% of the vote, you get 40% of the seats. And if you get, you know, 30% of the vote, then you get 30% of the seats. And most of the time, we would have minority governments in Canada. And I will speak, you know, I'm 64. I would say most of the best things that have happened from government have happened under minority governments in Canada. That's how we got public health care in 1965. There was a minority government and, you know, the opposition, we were able to push through public health care. It's how we got dental care and pharmacare and $10 a day child care. All these things came about because of minority governments. And so if governments have to negotiate with the other parties, I think it's a much stronger democracy. And then everybody knows that their vote counts and they can vote the way that they actually want to vote. So we need to reform our democracy.
Your turn.
Hi. So just to follow up about the protest and engagement comments earlier, I spend several hours a day on social media organizing and promoting protests. And you're right, the problem is that there's so many platforms that people are on, it's almost impossible to get them engaged. And even those who are on there, it's almost impossible to get them engaged. I don't know what the best thing to do is. I just keep doing it. And there is a protest at City Hall, Hamilton, 2 p.m. on Saturday, if anybody wants to come out. And my question is, what do you plan to do before the next election to work with the Liberal Party to take out Doug Ford so he doesn't get in again?
I can speak a little bit, and thank you, Martha. Yes, good to see you. So what do we plan to do sort of to change government between now and the next election? So the biggest thing, and this goes towards the question we just got about, what do we do? How do we turn this into an action? And we need to be planning for that next election now. And what we're starting to do, and what we've all been doing in our own ridings and now sort of in other ridings where we know that we need to try to gain seats, is door knocking. Going door to door, talking to people. The way that we're going to be able to break through sort of this wall that's up with, you know, social media and sort of, you know, people getting into their own sort of echo chambers and filtering of information is just going to be through direct human conversations where, you know, you're showing up at the doors, you're talking about the issues that are going on, and you're also listening and understanding, you know, what is the way forward together? How do we bring people in? What are the issues that people really care about and want to see their elected leaders working on? Because I think that's the other piece is there's a cynicism that people think that nothing's ever going to change. And maybe one political leader is no different than the next. And I think it's our job to show that we're going to be responsive to the people in our communities and actually try to advance what they want to see in policy. And I think that when we do that, when we're able to prove that, you know, the conversations that we're having at the doors are making its way into our platform, into our promises, then more people will feel engaged and want to talk to us because they're going to feel like those conversations really matter. So I think we need to do a lot of door-to-door engagement. I'm going to shout out Michelle, one of my team members who gets me on the doors even when I don't feel like it, and just talking to people relentlessly about why we need to see a change and the impact that it would have.
No, I don't really have to.
No, I would say, you know, first of all, the work that you're doing, you know, organizing people to come to rallies is really, really important work. And it may seem, you know, that, oh, you have organized a rally and there weren't a lot of people there, but you keep doing that work because eventually something will resonate. And I think we're at that crisis point right now. When Trump is, you know, keeps talking about the 51st state, you know, that is a threat to our sovereignty. It's a threat to our democracy. It's a threat to all of the rights that we have fought, that previous generations have fought for years and years, you know, for hundreds of years, so that we could live in a democracy. And so people are becoming more aware now. And it will start to resonate because a crisis gets people out. Crisis, when you start taking, people aren't aware of their democratic rights, so you start taking them away. And we are starting to lose them here. So I think the work that you're doing is really, really important. The other thing is that we need to get a firm commitment to democratic reform. And one of the most disappointing things for me in this struggle for democratic reform to get to proportional representation was in 2015, because, you know, Justin Trudeau said that that election would be the last first past the post election. And then he gets in with a majority government, he says, oh, maybe this first past the post is not so bad, you know? I mean, we need firm commitment, you know, that we, whether it's to your advantage or not to your advantage. And I would say in this last election, the way the votes turned out, we would have fewer seats than we have if we had proportional representation, but we're still committed to proportional representation. Because sometimes, you know, it will work out against you, but sometimes it'll work out for you. But that's not what matters. What matters is that every vote will count when we get past the first past the post system. And that's what we need a strong commitment to do.
Good answer, Chris.
Here?
I think that's an excellent answer.
Thank you.
Hello there. I had 6 matters I kind of wanted to discuss, quite honestly. Some are just ideas, some are just, I'm just been listening to what you guys have been saying, so it's kind of throwing me off, because I didn't know exactly how you'd be caring about this meeting here. The truth about, I'm a believer in the Gunda Winde, who brought us political freedom, a way of empowering people to think for themselves, and by using that acknowledgement, you're able to pass across the sides to be able to determine what's best for the people. And that's what participatory democracy basically goes about. In the Canadian system, you have a parliamentary system, which largely is a pomp and circumstance of democracy. You largely have all your power vested in the party leader. You're not voting for the people who are on the stage right now. You're voting for the party leader, who all of the ministers are at the pleasure of that party leader, who decides on what your democracy is run on. And unfortunately, when you guys get into office, you end up finding out that there's very limited in what you can do, and it's frustrating and it's hurtful, because that's not what you are there for. But that's the truth. Putting that aside, your party has done a terrible job in regards to PR. The Conservatives have been very effective in the radio stations, on air, and they've engaged constantly to the point where you have people puppeting their narratives and talking groups. So you need to effectively move into those areas, and you need to get organized within that. If you're going for actually voting people and stuff like that, I don't know if you actually have voting lists, but if there's 10 doors there and only 2 of them vote, go to the 2 doors to vote. Don't waste your time, because those people aren't going to make the time for you. I'm just telling you the truth. And in regards to winning elections in that regard, right? But then there's coming up with ideas and so forth. When it comes to ideas, I'm a believer to recycle the idea of, in regards to cities, empowering cities, The finances of the cities are largely done through property taxes. In order to change that, we need, sometimes it's not the taxes you get charged, but what are done with those taxes. So you need an MST, municipal sales tax. So essentially, if you were in power within Ontario and the province, you'd say, okay, we're going to take 3% of the 8%, and we're going to use that to reward cities and towns for their economic activity so they can also use those funds to meet the needs, because the truth is the hearts of the country and so forth is the towns and the city, because that's what makes a country and a province and all those different things and so forth. On the other side of that is
That's good, actually. Can we respond to that?
okay.
Yeah. Okay. Good. Okay. Do you want? Yeah. Okay. First of all, I agree with your first point. And I'll tell you, one of the most disappointing things to me when I got elected in 2018 is to watch how the governing party governs. Because really it's the premier and about 3 cabinet ministers who have any say in anything, and everybody else is just towing the line, as you say. And that's why we need democratic reform. Like, this is why we need proportional representation, so that not the party system is a system of control. I used to be a school board trustee in Toronto. There were 25 trustees at the time, and we, most of us were politically aligned. Some were not aligned, with any particular party, but there would be 15 votes at a board meeting, and every vote would be a different configuration of trustees based on what we thought would be best for the students. Like, how can we best, I would love to see that level of democracy in our parliaments, in our legislatures. It would be just amazing to have real, honest debates. I would go into a trustee debate sometimes thinking, oh, I'm going to vote this way on this motion. And then I'd hear arguments, or I'd get facts, from somebody else about this. And I would actually change my vote in the middle of the debate. I'd think, oh, no, you know what? I'm changing my vote. And this was not just me. This was common among us, because we were really having a dialogue about how can we best serve the students. And that's what I would love to see happening in the legislature, not just a debate where people are parroting, party lines, but where people are actually saying, how can we best serve the people of this province? What policy will help us to do this? Not hiding behind a bunch of talking points, that are designed to cover up what they're actually doing, which is benefiting a few donors. And so, I hear what you're saying there. As far as the taxes go, you're right. Like, the way our tax system works, the majority of our taxes go to the federal government, which delivers the least services. A middle amount of taxes go to the provincial government, which delivers healthcare, education, resource development, a bunch of other services, so quite a few services. But a lot of the services that we come across every day are delivered by the municipal governments, roads, schools, sewers, recreation centers, all those things that we use every day. Housing, and the municipal government gets the least amount of our taxes. So they're dependent upon, that money trickling down from the other levels to deliver it. I'd love to see some, some reform in the tax system, so that, the services are actually, we're guaranteed that the services that we need and we use every day are going to be funded.
Hi, my name's Pam. I think one of the biggest things that would help people when you guys are out campaigning is pandering to the bread and butter issues, letting people know how everything Doug Ford is affecting them every single day, because a lot of people aren't aware of what he's doing, and they just all shrug it off like nothing's happening. And pretty soon we won't have health care, we won't have education, and all of his buddies will have all the money, and it's called a kleptocracy.
I think, and I think we need to have a conversation about really, I think what you're speaking to is sort of really educating people about how to vote truly in their self-interest, right? So looking at, what is the difference of this government and the policies that they're making, and how is it impacting you day to day? And most people, when you ask them, will say that they don't think that things are going very well, that their life today is probably worse than it was 8 years ago. But there's something lost between the connection of why and who's doing it and who's responsible. And so I think that's when we talk about some of the work that we need to do as communicators and as representatives, it's making those connections so that people understand why the conditions of their life are the way that they are, and how we can actually educate people to vote in their self-interest. Because unless you're a corporation or sort of a multi-millionaire, most people's best interest is not being served by this government.
Yeah, actually, I would add to that. I was just talking to the president of OCUFA, the Ontario College of University Faculty Associations, was here. The government just converted, is making changes to OSAP so that what used to be a grant is now going to be a loan. And the calculation that he mentioned, and we've got to check it, and he's going to check it too, but is an estimated almost $5,000 per student per year in additional debt that they're going to have to take on. And so this is money that the government will then collect interest on when the students graduate. So this is just like when young people are wondering why they're so broke, why they can't afford housing, why, to buy a house, why they can't afford rent, why there are so many people homeless, why they have, student debt that takes decades to pass back. This is all government policy. And we need to change those policies. And the changes to OSAP, that's a step in the wrong direction. That is taking money from low and middle income young people and giving it to people who, to the wealthy. I mean, and then Doug Ford can take it and hand it out to, friends of his who own a strip club, which...
Yeah. That really happened. And so, Pam, I hear in your voice the kind of outrage that we feel, but we're being, kind of well-behaved tonight, but we feel that outrage that you feel. But what I want to say is, and you are a lovely audience and a trusting audience, but not everybody wants to hear from us because we are elected officials, and there's a healthy degree of cynicism, right? So when we say, like you said, they're losing, why is this happening? And if we say, in a very NDP-ish kind of educated way, that it's Doug Ford, they go, yeah, you would say that. You politicians are all the same. So what, Dr. Yates said earlier, what can we do about it? And I think what we need to do is maybe, as much as we are, leaders, elected leaders in our community, we need to profile and put forward other leaders in the community, people's peers, elected, other people that are elected, whether it's labor leaders or whether it's, parent groups or community groups or healthcare workers. They need to be put forward because, people just generally, I don't know why, don't necessarily trust politicians instantly. And so I think it's our job as much for us to be here and you to hear from us. It's our job as elected officials to find those leaders and for us to showcase them and for us to give them the ability to have a voice and for them to speak as often as possible directly to people that are impacted by the horrific cuts that are happening in healthcare and education in this province.
About 20 minutes ago, there was a question that was asked, a fundamental question that just got ignored. And it morphed into talking about proportional representation. The question that was asked was, how will you work with the NDP party? And, we're lucky to have the three of you. You're really important and you work hard for us. But the opposition parties right now are completely ineffective and weak. And it's allowed Doug Ford to just completely walk over the system. During the last two elections, I've reached out to my NDP member, pleading that the two parties merge. Never got any response, not even the courtesy of a response. I was in the MPP's office volunteering. I talked to the staff. They refused to even talk to me about it. It was utter and complete silence. This is the solution. The two parties, the NDP and the Liberals, have to merge and work together. You talk about proportional representation. It's not going to happen, sorry. But the only solution is a strong, unified opposition. I mean, there may be a case made someday for three parties, but not for now. We need that. And all of you just constantly ignore this and just pass it with your talking points and ignore what really needs to be done.
I see somebody else's hand go up, and I think they want to comment on the same question. Is your comment on the same question? Go ahead.
Sorry, Heather, and then right here as well.
Okay.
I'll be right back. There you go.
Okay, thank you very much.
I agree with that a little bit, but I totally disagree with the concept of merging. I think you don't need to merge. I think for one election, you need to cooperate. You need to make sure that the vote is not being split and letting the Conservatives come up the middle. Just for one election. And after that election, you sort things out. Probably you'll have a coalition government. Probably there'll be a minority. You can get a lot of things done. I don't know whether the Liberals or the NDP might have more. Even the Conservatives might have more. But the point would be it would be a minority, and the opposition would have power. Right now, our opposition actually represents the majority of Ontarians. But you don't have power. If you can end this for one election cycle, then you can bring in proportional representation, and you can go back to competing in every riding. But I want to ask you, for just one election, be strategic. No, I don't want to use the word strategic. I don't want people to have to vote strategically. I want you to choose who is going to beat the Conservative in that riding, and only that person runs. And so I think all of the NDP who are now in Parliament, in the legislature, would win. All of the Liberals would win, and you would get and the Greens, you would get a bunch more. And you wouldn't eliminate the Conservatives, because Conservative voters deserve to have some representation, but don't keep handing over ridings to the Conservatives by focusing on your own party at the expense of the province. That's my suggestion. Just for one election, do this, bring in proportional representation, please.
We have some other people.
I hear what you're saying, and I share your frustration. And I share your frustration that, you know, what's really happened here is the political right, the political spectrum has shifted so far extreme right. You know, there was a time when, you know, and like I mentioned, I'm 64. You know, when the spectrum was this wide, and now the spectrum's, you know, gone way over to the right, and things like public health care, public education, affordable housing, making sure that nobody's homeless in the province, that nobody's going hungry. I mean, that we've got 10% of the province using food banks every day is absolutely shameful, you know, and that we've gotten to this point, that our government, our policies have gotten us to this point is really, really frightening. And so the question is, like, how do we actually reform this? How do we get this back? And I hear what you're saying about, you know, can we make a coalition? Can we, you know, reach out? I think we should have conversations, you know, about how do we defeat this government. But we need commitments. And the problem, the frustration has been for us is that, you know, and I'm going to speak frankly, like, I didn't get into politics because I wanted to be an MPP, you know, and I got into this because I wanted to save schools. Like, that was the initial thing that got me in here. And I worked with, you know, the Campaign for Public Education. We had Liberal and NDP members who ran for MPP in the 2003 election. Kathleen Wynne was one of them, you know, and I was mainly helping NDP candidates, but I actually went out and helped her. And I thought, well, the Liberals got in, at least they'll stop the education cuts. But they didn't. You know, and the cuts continued for another 15 years under the Liberals. You know, that we ended up with 1,000 people in the hospital hallways. So our frustration with the Liberals is they'll make promises like Justin Trudeau saying, oh, it'll be the last first past the post election. And then it doesn't actually happen. So it's difficult to make those kind of agreements when, you know, we might end up losing. And my fear is if we don't, you know, turn the tide in the next election, we will lose. We lost under, and I'm speaking frankly here, under the Liberals. They got elected in 2003 promising to freeze tuition fees at colleges and universities. They froze them for 2 years, and then they doubled them over the next 10. and they froze, what they froze was the funding for colleges and universities without any inflationary increases, which meant that our colleges and universities were grossly underfunded by the time they left. And it used to be 85% of the operating costs for colleges and our public colleges and universities came through our taxes. And by the time the Liberals were done in 2018, it was less than 50%. And they renamed them. They don't call them public colleges and universities anymore. They call them publicly assisted colleges and universities. And this government, completing that privatization agenda. So I think we should have dialogue with the other side and figure things out. But the challenge is, fundamental things, public education, public colleges, public universities, public health care, democratic reform. Can we actually trust them to implement it if we supported them in an election? And the track record, it says no. And so we need to find a way to actually build some trust, so that we know that if we did make whatever agreement that, whoever gets in is going to bring in democratic reform, that it would actually happen. And that's...
Can I just add also from a really personal perspective, and Chris, I thought that, that you answered this very well. I'm a New Democrat. That is in my DNA. It's my, my personal set of beliefs. And this is personal. I believe in publicly funded, publicly delivered education, full stop, publicly funded, publicly delivered healthcare, full stop. I am 65, wow. And I have seen, and being politically active, I have seen governments that have varied from that, whether it's conservatives moving to the left or liberals moving hard to the right. I've seen that. But with the New Democrats, you may not like what we stand for, but we primarily don't vary from that. So you know what you're getting when you vote for a New Democrat. And we didn't choose, when you choose to be a New Democrat and run for election, you're choosing the hard path, to be honest with you. And like Chris said, you don't choose to run because you think you're going to get elected as a New Democrat. It's not easy to get elected as a New Democrat because of the money and because of some of the incumbent advantages that we see. So there's a reason, on a personal level, that I'm standing here as a New Democrat. I'm proud to be a New Democrat. So I will just leave that, yeah. And the other thing that I will say is, again, I keep using the word mechanics. How does this work? So who are we, liberal, conservative, or liberal or NDP? Who is it? Our party presidents that decide that in a particular riding, those people in the riding aren't given an option to vote for a New Democrat, a liberal, and a progressive conservative? To me, that's another erosion of democracy. I want to see Doug Ford out. Believe me, I do. But I also don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater. Can I say that? It just seems a horrific expression now that I just said it. But you know what I mean? Now we're going to sort of, take shortcuts to change this for expediency and efficiency, because we have a horrific premier right now. But I don't think that it's the answer. Do you know what I'm saying? It's not the fundamental answer, which is we need to have the kind of reforms that allows every person in every riding the democratic right to vote for the party that they want to vote for, right? And so that's how I feel.
I want to also, may I just add one thing to that, which is, and if renouncing ages, because I'm 35, I don't have the, but I will say, I know a lot of people, particularly in younger progressive groups, they want to see a strongly defined progressive option to get them out to the polls. If we start, and we see this in the States, right? In the United States, when we have a two-party system and we're seeing a driftward to the right, we end up with a really far right and a right of center. And if we don't have a compelling progressive option for people to actually believe in and feel hopeful about, then they're not going to come to the polls to vote for the center right. They're just not going to come to the polls at all. And unfortunately, I think what we've seen, and I would invite anybody who's really feels strongly about this to look at the voting records, because the Liberal caucus of today is not the same as 10 years ago, 20 years ago. So there were some really important bills that went by where that caucus was divided, where they didn't have a united vote because some wanted to vote with the Conservatives and some wanted to vote against, and they allowed them to vote as they wanted, and that's a divided caucus. I think it shows that they have shifted. As we've seen a lot of political kind of forces shift to the right, so has that party. I feel very strongly, and I would only run for the New Democrats because I feel very, very strongly that we need to have a progressive option on the ballot always, or else I think we're going to lose confidence in the voting system altogether.
Yeah, here, here.
Thank you. It's working now. Thank you so much. We are just coming to the end of our time, so we have 3 more questions. Michaela.
Hi, Victoria Shimlowski. I always vote NDP, both at the provincial and at the federal level.
Thank you.
And I believe in what they stand for. And we need to be very clear what the party, the platform is. And I see that consistently. I am upset that I lost my MP. Okay, and that all because of Donald Trump and this whole fear-mongering and strategic voting. I don't do that. I know what I believe in. And the other thing I have to say is Doug Ford deliberately held an election just when Donald Trump came in the worst time of the year, which people had a hard time getting out to vote because of the weather, the streets were not plowed. It was disgusting, and it really makes me angry. People did go out, but I'm sure that suppressed the vote. Now, the other point I've got to say is I'm involved in a number of different groups and organizations. I think Hamilton Labour Councils, the Labour Council, and people who are in the labor movement are trying to fight back. I know people in the Health Coalition, there's other type of labor leaders that are really going to challenge this Bill 33. We need to all stand together. There needs to be more of this reaching out to different networks and the groups with it. I also think it's really important to start getting more young people through the college and universities to come to the Democrat and help empower them so they have a voice. So I think we need to make our coalitions and work together and network, and that's how I'm going to think that that's really important, and I'd like to see what you would like to say about that. Thank you.
Can we just hear all 3 and we'll get back to you on that? Yeah, thank you for that comment. It's very important.
Oh, hi. Yes, I can appreciate the importance possibly of working toward coalitions, but in the very short term, I'm very optimistic about the NDP's prospects this year. I think Marit is just outstanding in the legislature and being able to hold the government to account. She's very competent, and also she's very personable. The videos that the party recently produced promoting Marit are just outstanding, and hopefully you can get those videos distributed more widely. And also, just very briefly, I would like to see between now and March 23rd some effort to have the NDP and the Liberals hold a joint news conference or maybe a rally or two outside the legislature to reinforce the importance of having the legislature back in session, because both opposition parties are stand united on that issue. And with the larger the news conference could be, the more effective it would be in attracting much needed media attention.
Hi, good evening, MPs. I was just going to share as your constituent some of the things that are important to me, that are exciting me. I'm glad to hear about the proportional representation stance. I feel like that's extremely important, and I would really like to see the end of the first past the post system and the kind of inflammation that it's adding to our political system and discourse. Environmental issues are extremely important to me, and the mass extinction that we're currently living through, and that's some of why I support proportional representation through a citizens' assembly. And I think in having met with several politicians, I got the sense that there was a sense of urgency for folks like myself to engage with our communities and mobilize and make noise. I think one of the things that I would find buoying or would, I think, help me to mobilize people, for instance, would be some serious kind of accountability made manifest and visible for people who weren't necessarily as politically literate, let's say, or informed. And I can give an example. It sounds to me like the PC party, for instance, here in Ontario, is more and more closely resembling a criminal syndicate. And I think I would be motivated if Doug Ford, for instance, has done something illegal, him being imprisoned. And as someone who has a lot of issues with our current justice system, I feel like a politician who makes some sort of a statement and doesn't follow through, are there ways that these can be more legally binding? Are there ways that when you're sharing these stories of kind of ludicrous behavior and ways of subverting the rule of law, that these politicians are imprisoned, that it's not just like drug users and petty thieves, but like they're benefactors, these ultra wealthy donors? Or do you see that that's just not in the cards right now? Because I think that for me would be very inspiring, seeing some political goon getting imprisoned for illegal activities or being held to account for the illegal activities that they haven't historically been.
Yeah, I think that if people, commit crimes, they should go to jail no matter who they are, right? The law applies to all of us, and the fact that certain elected politicians seem to be able to fly under the radar goes back to the erosion of democracy that we talked about, the rule of law that we talked about. I'm going to answer your question and combine it with a comment about Marit. Marit Stiles is a phenomenal leader, and we are proud, really proud to serve behind her. She's not particularly tall, but she faces off with Doug Ford. She is from Newfoundland, so she is very personable, and she is relentless. And part of that, her courage. In fact, at one time, Doug Ford really heckles her hard and says rude things to her that you don't hear. And she did say, "Oh yeah, Doug, all 5'1" of me is not afraid of you," because he's a big, menacing guy. So she's got the spunk, she's got the drive, and I've never seen anybody connect with people so instantly like she does. But she's holding him to account. So we now have 2 RCMP investigations into his insider dealing, his preferential treatment when it came to the Greenbelt developers that were handed $8.5 billion of taxpayers' value to those select developers. And now through the Skills Development Fund, the OPP are going to be investigating that. So it's about time that, because I think Doug Ford thinks this is just like taking, candy from a baby. I got another baby analogy. That was kind of awful too. But I think that he needs to know that he is going to be held accountable. Right now he thinks that it's lawless and he's getting away with everything, and it seems that he is, which is really upsetting. But, we have to use there are accountability measures already in the legislature. We have the integrity commissioner. We have I'm missing some other the auditor general. So we try to use those that are those are independent officers of the legislature that are supposed to be oversight, and we try to use those as much as possible. And then beyond that, we can only rely on the judiciary and rely on investigators to find out, what did he really do? What did he know, and when did he know it, and how did he benefit personally? And we're hoping that that's what we're going to hear from the RCMP and the OPP investigation that's still pending. And that's because of Marit's work in the legislature.
We have one more question and a comment.
Very, very briefly, while proportional representation might be an ideal. In the meantime, could we use ranked choice voting, which gives people, if not their first choice, at least their second?
So, Chris is the expert on this, so I don't know why I'm answering this question. But the point is that it's the government in power that will make those changes. And if the system that's in place benefits the government in power to keep the government in power, they may not, they're not necessarily going to change it. And while I have the mic, I just want to go back to the comment here about engaging leaders in our community. And when you talked about the Ontario Health Coalition, that's one example of incredible work. Most of those people are volunteers doing incredible work across the province. So that's what I meant when I said earlier, we need to, as politicians, stand back and give the mic to those community leaders because they are doing phenomenal and important work in our communities. And we like to work with them, and we like to make connections all across the province so that we can see that kind of collective action and collective power. Anybody else?
And just to add on to that, I think it connects with sort of what you asked about, sort of what can we do? And I think to your point around sort of coalition building, I think absolutely every single one of us can tap into one of the existing efforts for advocacy that are already really well organized, like, the Health Coalition, like ACORN, all these organizations that are incredibly good at organizing and could use more people power for their efforts, absolutely. But then I think we also have to build coalitions across organizations and domains. And I was talking to a group of people about this the other day that was particularly interested in healthcare. And I said, absolutely, all of us together who are interested in public healthcare need to join together and show up to rallies and protest and do all these things. And also, we need to reach out to the education folks, to the folks who are really tapped into environmental organizing, to the folks really tapped into issues around home care and long-term care and all these other sectors, because ultimately, the person squeezing all of those sectors is the same person, is the provincial government. And so we really need to tap into each other's energies and show up for each other, because that'll just widen our networks, widen the net. Because it doesn't matter at the end of the day whether someone's voting issue is healthcare or environment or democratic reform or any of those other issues, as long as they're showing up to the polls and demanding a change in government, that counts just the same as if it's your particular issue. So I think as much as we can support each other, and then the final point I think is just use all of our talents. Every single person in this room has a specific talent that is specific to you that you could offer, and it doesn't have to be the same. If you're a great writer, write letters to the editor, write op-eds, do what you can. If you're a great cook, cook some pizzas for your friends and host a pizza and politics and talk about politics. If you're an artist, host a paint night where you engage with a community group and support their advocacy and their organizing work. Whatever you can do, I think it's just the time for all of us to do what we can do and to do what fits with our talents and our energies.
Thank you. Yes. Okay. I just wanted to, we're wrapping up here, so I just wanted to say one final thing. I noticed that I'm not the only person with gray hair in this room. And I think every one of us, we want to leave a legacy of a strong democracy, a strong economy, a strong public health care, public education systems. And we are all leaders. Everybody, every one of you in this room is a leader. I didn't get into politics because I wanted to be an MPP. When Mike Harris was making cuts to my kids' schools, 25 years ago, I just got really frustrated. And I'll tell you, the first time I spoke at a rally at Queen's Park, I was nervous as hell. But the thing that motivated me was the anger that I felt because of what he was doing to my children's education and to, not just my kids, but all of the children's education. And the anger that I feel now about what's happening with healthcare. When you show up at an emergency room and you wait there for 24 hours, if the emergency room is open. Meanwhile, they're squandering our tax dollars. And it's that anger that we can channel into action. And each one of you is a leader in your communities. You've got circles of friends. You've got circles. And the one final anecdote I will say, in 2003, when I was fighting, with the Campaign for Public Education, they canceled the adult seniors night school programs in Toronto, in the TDSB. And the seniors mobilized. And they had town halls all across the city of Toronto, and they invited the media, and the media came. And the board was under supervision. Mike Harris had put the TDSB under supervision at the time. And the supervisor, I remember this press conference because I was there, and the supervisor, he said he was reversing the decision. He was not going to be cutting the seniors' adult night school programs. And he said, and I'll say it 3 times. He said this. I'll say it 3 times. I will not mess with seniors. I will not mess with seniors. I will not mess with seniors. You have a lot of power because seniors vote and people know, the government, politicians know that you vote. So mobilize other community members to get out to fight for our public healthcare system, our public education system, and most importantly, our democracy, so that we can all leave that as the legacy to the next generation.
Hear, hear. So we want to, the 3 of us here want to thank you so much for coming out tonight. It really is inspiring to us, that you care enough to come here tonight and be here. I also want to thank Chris for coming to here tonight to our beautiful city. I also want to thank Brian McMahon for starting us off on the right foot tonight. And so, we will be convening other events like this in the future, follow-ups on this. And so, whatever energy that we have inspired in you and you've inspired in us, we want to see that continue. So thank you once again for being here tonight. Thank you so much.
One more comment. Yeah, and one final reminder: the Ontario Place Protectors that's fighting the Ontario Place Act, that is about Bill 5. That is about Bill C5. It is a small grassroots organization, and they are up against both the federal and provincial governments are going to be interveners in that. They're going to be, they're going to be bringing their lawyers to fight to support that Ontario Place Act because it is the precursor to Bill 5 and Bill C5. So they need, it's a grassroots, it's a David versus Goliath fight, and they need support. And the way that we can support them is to get out, look them up online, Ontario Place Protectors. They need public support in order to win that case at the Supreme Court. Thank you.
Hello. There is a protest planned at Queen's Park, March 23rd, 11:30.